This is not a story about patience. It is a story about a command that told armed men to stand down, men who believed God himself required them to purge the field before the harvest ever came. They were not being asked to wait quietly. They were being asked to disobey their own theology. To understand why that request nearly broke them, you have to understand what a field meant in first century Judea. This was not agriculture as metaphor. A single failed harvest did not mean inconvenience. It meant debt, foreclosure, and children sold into slavery to cover what the family owed the landowner or the Roman tax collector. Grain was survival measured in weeks. A farmer who watched a rival's crop flourish while his own failed was not watching bad luck. He was watching his family's future disappear into someone else's granary. Into that world, Jesus places a very specific plant, one his audience would have recognized immediately, and one modern readers almost universally misunderstand. The Greek word is Zizanion. In English translations, it becomes weeds or tares, but the actual plant was Darnel, Lolium temulentum, a grass so close to wheat in its early growth that even an experienced farmer could not reliably tell the two apart until the grain heads finally emerged, months into the growing season. Worse, Darnel roots do not grow beside wheat roots. They grow into them, tangled underground in a way that made selective extraction nearly impossible without tearing the wheat out with it. This was not a passive detail, it was the entire hinge of the parable. And there is something else the average retelling leaves out entirely. Planting darnel in an enemy's field was a documented act of sabotage in the ancient world, serious enough that Roman legal codes explicitly addressed it as a punishable offense. A rival did not need violence to destroy you. He needed one moonless night, a sack of seed that looked exactly like yours, and a field you would not inspect closely until it was already too late. When the landowner in this story says, "An enemy has done this," his audience did not hear a strange fable. They heard a crime they recognized, the agricultural equivalent of arson. Now place that scene inside the religious climate of the audience listening to it. First century Judean piety was not built around gentle coexistence with sin. It was built around separation, visible, immediate, and non-negotiable. The Pharisees structured an entire legal system around ritual purity precisely so the righteous would not be contaminated by contact with the corrupt. The tax collector, the collaborator, the ritually unclean. Down at Qumran, a community of Essenes had taken separation to its furthest conclusion, physically withdrawing into the desert, convinced that Jerusalem itself was too compromised to remain part of. And beyond both of these groups stood a harder edge still, men later remembered as zealots, for whom purification was not symbolic at all. It meant the knife. It meant removing collaborators from Israel by force, because waiting for God to act felt, to them, like faithlessness dressed up as patience. This was the spectrum Jesus was speaking into, not a debate about tolerance, a live, urgent, sometimes violent argument about who had the authority to decide who belonged in God's field, and how soon that decision needed to be made. So when he tells a story about a landowner who refuses to let his own servants rip the darnel out early, he is not offering a comforting agricultural analogy. He is stepping directly into the middle of that argument and taking the position almost no one in his audience wanted to hear. Picture the scene as it actually happened. Not stained glass, but dust. A hillside crowd of farmers, day laborers, men who had pulled darnel from their own family plots since childhood and knew exactly how brutal that work was. Jesus tells them of a man who sowed good seed in his field. While everyone slept, an enemy came and sowed darnel among the wheat, then slipped away before dawn. Weeks pass. The plants grow up together, indistinguishable root systems already fusing beneath the soil, until finally the wheat heads appear and the darnel is exposed for what it always was. The servants come to the landowner with a request that is not naive. It is urgent, protective, entirely reasonable by every standard of that world. Do you want us to go and pull them up? This is not passivity. This is men who understand exactly what a contaminated harvest will cost the household, asking for permission to act immediately, decisively, the way any responsible steward would. And the landowner says no. Not yet, be patient in the soft devotional sense later generations gave the line, but a hard, specific refusal rooted in agricultural reality. No, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. He is not describing an emotional risk. He is describing a physical one. The roots are already entangled. Pull the darnel now, and you tear out the very crop you are trying to save. The only safe moment for separation is harvest, when the plants are mature enough to distinguish by sight and strong enough to survive the pulling. Until then, the decision the servants are begging to make cannot be made without destroying the thing they are trying to protect. Let both grow together until the harvest, he tells them. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat into my barn. To modern ears, this sounds like classic devotional patience. To first-century ears standing in a culture built entirely on the assumption that the righteous must separate themselves from evil now, this was something closer to scandal. And Jesus does not explain it publicly. That detail is almost always skipped over, and it matters. He finishes the story and the crowd disperses. Farmers going back to their own fields, still turning the parable over without an answer. It is only later, alone, inside a house, that his own disciples come to him and ask him to explain it. This was not a lesson delivered for public consumption. It was a private reckoning, reserved for the men who had left everything to follow him. The men who needed more than anyone in that crowd to understand exactly what he was asking of them. And what he tells them, according to the account, reframes the entire story into something far more pointed than agricultural advice. The sower of the good seed, he says, is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age. The harvesters are angels. Sit with what that actually means for the men in that room. These were not neutral farmers hearing a folk tale about crop management. These were men who had watched Jesus challenge tax collectors to follow him, watched him eat at the tables of the ritually unclean, watched him refuse to endorse the purity boundaries the Pharisees enforced, and refuse just as pointedly the violent solution the zealots were quietly organizing toward. Some of these very disciples carried that tension inside themselves. Simon, remembered as the zealot, and even Judas, whose name would later become inseparable from a different kind of forced resolution. These were men who had spent their lives believing that a coming Messiah's first order of business would be exactly what the servants in the story requested. Go through the field immediately and pull out everything that does not belong. And Jesus tells them the harvest will come. The judgment is real, and it will be total. The weeds will burn, he says, without softening the image at all. But the timing and the authority to execute it belongs to no one standing in that room, not the disciples, not the movement, not any human hand acting in the name of righteousness before its appointed hour. This is the detail the softened version of this story almost always erases. The servants asking permission to pull the weeds are not a symbolic stand-in for some distant future church. They are, in that private room, essentially standing in for the disciples themselves, men whose very instinct toward immediate purification, The same instinct animating the Pharisees' separation and the Zealots' blade is being named directly as the danger, not the solution. Jesus is not simply telling a story about God's patience with sinners in some abstract sense. He is looking at the men closest to him, men who wanted a kingdom that arrived through vindication, who wanted their enemies named and removed, who wanted the corrupt tax collector and the Roman collaborator sorted out of the field before the wheat had even finished growing. And he is telling them that the very authority they assumed would belong to them, or to their Messiah acting through them, in fact belongs exclusively to the end of the age, executed by angels on a timeline none of them control. He is taking the knife out of their hands. Not gently, permanently. There is no record of how the disciples responded in that room. No question, no protest, no recorded relief. The text simply moves on, the way it so often does after Jesus says something that cannot be immediately absorbed. But consider what was actually being asked of them, in the specific texture of their world. These were men shaped by a faith where visible purity was not optional, where table fellowship itself was a moral statement, where withdrawal into the desert was a legitimate spiritual strategy, where some of their own countrymen believed righteousness required a blade in the dark. And into that world, Jesus asks them to do something that had almost no precedent in their inherited theology, to live beside what they hated, to let the tax collector remain at the table, to let the collaborator walk the same roads, to let the line between righteous and corrupt stay blurred, indistinguishable, tangled root to root beneath the surface. Not because the difference did not matter, but because no human hand could safely draw that line without destroying what it was trying to save. That is not a comforting request. It is one of the harder things asked of anyone in that century, in that place, inside that faith. To hold judgment suspended in a culture where suspended judgment looked, to everyone around you, like faithlessness. To carry the certainty that evil would eventually be answered without ever being handed the authority to answer it yourself. The parable does not tell us what it cost the men who first heard it, only that the field kept growing, wheat and darnel tangled together beneath soil no one was permitted to disturb, waiting for a harvest none of them would live to see arrive on their own terms.